Welcome back to Mock Draft Monday. Today, we've got a 7-round mock draft that we did with Pro Football Focus's Mock Draft Simulator. We did the Tennessee Titans. Can they go from being the first overall pick to competing for an AFC South title? It's going to take a lot. But Ryan, there were some needs that we needed to get through before we give out our picks here that we ended up selecting. What were the biggest needs that needed to be addressed?
Yeah, I think obviously quarterback conversation is going to be a big one for the Tennessee Titans this offseason. Do you go number one overall? Do you go to the free agency route? Is there a trade market for Matthew Stafford? That's been a conversation point, obviously, over the last couple of weeks. But I think overall, though, Joe, outside of the quarterback position, it's about getting better on the edges, man. And that means at offensive tackle, that means at defensive end, and that also means maybe outside on both sides of the football as well. Wide receiver, cornerback, some of those getting more dynamic and athletic on the edges and on the perimeter. That I think is the main thing that Tennessee Titan fans should be looking for this offseason.
The other needs that we really focused on addressing here pretty early was fully rounding out their offensive line, going and grabbing more weapons at receiver and at tight end. And at linebacker, I think that we have found a really good athlete. Overall, defensively, some of the guys that we added into the mix here were pretty explosive athletes that could funnel right into this roster and maybe have some early contributions from some of these day 3 guys that we selected. But the big first talking point as we jump into this first pick, Ryan, we decided not to go quarterback. There's options for them, not great options, but there's options for them to try and address this from free agency. We went with Abdul Carter as the first overall pick. There's a possibility, I would say a strong one, that they could trade out of this spot for a team that really badly wants Cam Ward. But talk on, what do you think is the philosophy here if they don't go quarterback and what their reasoning would be?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that this is necessarily a draft that if you're staying at one, that it's a no-brainer that you take a quarterback. Because like you said, there might not be a plethora of options, but there aren't bad options out there, right? Like Sam Darnold and Justin Fields and trading for a Matt Stafford. There are options out there that I think are just a little bit more attractive for me to force a quarterback at the number one spot. And I think also at the end of the day, there should be an openness to take the best player available and to take an elite football player and a blue chipper. And I don't think there's a blue chip quarterback in this class, but what we have is a blue chip in this class, Joe, with his number one overall pick is Abdul Carter, man. Like 3 years from now, if I told you that Abdul Carter is one of the top 2 to 3, maybe 4 pass rushers in the NFL, would you be shocked? Like I wouldn't personally.
No, absolutely not. And we've been very high on him throughout this draft process. He is extremely gifted. They even hinted at, and I know that some people have tried to really dissect the words put out by this front office, but they even said that why pass up on a generational talent when you have the first overall pick? Abdul Carter is that guy. He is extremely freakishly gifted to be a 10, 15 sack guy in the NFL on a consistent basis. The quarterback stuff, I think a lot of people always assume when you're desperate for a quarterback that you have to take one. If you're not in love with the options, it makes a lot more sense to wait, because the worst thing you can do for the future of your franchise is forcing a square peg in a round hole, trying to make something happen that isn't going to work in your eyes. If you're already from day one uncomfortable with the player that is your future quarterback, and you felt like you were making a lot of concessions for that decision, then you're going to be on some very rocky roads for the near future. So them ending up with Abdul Carter, it's the best possible decision. You have again, freakish athlete that will be super productive. We went with Ariante Ursary in the second round at pick 35. Admittedly, I'm not the hugest fan of Ariante Ursary. This was a pick that you wanted to go with. I've got other tackles that I have graded higher, but he's got the size, he's got the length, he's got all the requisite traits. Joining a group of offensive linemen that they've spent multiple early draft picks on building up, Ursary could be that final piece with a young group that takes them over the top.
The Titans had one of the worst right tackle situations this past year with Nicholas Petit-Frere, and they need to find a bookend on the other side of J.C. Latham. And I think that could be Ursary, man. Like, he's over 6'6". I think he actually is slightly below 6'6", but he's 340 pounds. He's athletic and he's physical. He's a little bit stiff as a pass protector, but I think it's good enough redirectionally to be solid in that aspect. But if we're getting bullies on both at the bookends, I think him and Latham together is a lot of power and a lot of size.
One thing I want to address before we kind of talk overarching for the remaining picks that we had here. We did end up going with the quarterback in the 5th round at pick 167 with Kyle McCord, who does provide a little bit of developmental upside. This is a former 5-star recruit who was highly sought after. Didn't pan out the way that we would have hoped at Ohio State, but had a really nice end to his career at Syracuse, actually finishing in the Heisman conversation at the very end of the top 10 of vote getters. McCord's got the tools, and he's actually a better decision maker than people realize. In the right environment, he could eventually possibly start, but at the very least, this is a guy who is going to be, I think, a long-standing backup in the NFL. McCord, to me, would be a home run, not because he would be your eventual starter and answer quarterback, but he provides some hope, but at the very least, a consistency.
It's a 5th round pick, man. If he ends up being a good backup, awesome. If he doesn't, nobody cares because it's not a big investment, obviously, into the quarterback position. Kyle McCord, outside of one football game this year, was pretty dang good. And he's got some underlying arm talent. He's got, obviously, a good frame to him. It's going to be about cutting out a couple of those doofus moments at times that he still has and staring down receivers at times. But I could see a world where he ends up being a very good backup quarterback on the NFL level. And in the 5th round, that's all you're really asking for.
Ryan, I think we were pretty successful at finding some talented weapons to add into whoever's starting at quarterback. Let's say maybe it is Sam Darnold. They're able to swing him and sway him into coming. Brennan Stool and Jalen Noel are underrated prospects in this class. What did you think about those moves there for us?
Well, I mean, I love Jalen Noel, especially the Iowa State wide receiver. He's a little bit shorter, below 5'10", 196 pounds. He's kind of got that modern day slot receiver that's really good after the catch, really smooth, good route runner. He just had a really good, obviously, Reese's Senior Bowl week. So I think that is a tremendous value there in the early portion of the 4th round. And then Brennan Stool didn't quite take the step I wanted him to at Clemson this year, but he is still a very athletic move piece at the tight end position, could work in the slot, can be detached from the line of scrimmage. If is he able to gain a little bit more weight, which is still obviously a conversation point, then maybe he could be a little bit more of an inline guy. But both very good athletes and pass catching upside with both. And I think that at that point juncture in the draft, I think they're both values.
Last bit that I want to bring up here, Barrett Carter, freakish athlete that could play as this weak side linebacker next to Kenneth Murray. And then we also got Jason Marshall Jr. for some pretty good value, who I don't know if he's going to start on the outside, but at the very least is really good depth at corner. Corner position for the Titans spent a lot of money on L'Jarius Sneed, but it doesn't hurt to add in some quality guys. I liked Marshall in the preseason. Didn't really stand out a ton this year in the SEC, but as I reiterate, 6th round, pretty good value of being able to land him.
Yeah, I mean, Marshall was banged up, obviously, in the season and missed several games, but I think that he is a tough, tenacious player and worth a swing, obviously, in the 6th round. If he ends up just being a good, solid depth piece and a guy that can play special teams, that's great. And it's the same thing, honestly, for Barrett Carter. Barrett Carter ends up going in the 4th round in this mock draft, and if he is just a backup linebacker that plays special teams, that's a value. If he develops into a starting will on the next level, then that's where we're talking about the real value in this draft and finding those developmental upside guys. So I think at that juncture of the drafts, I think they're both worth the swing, and they bring a good baseline of at least being solid special teamers for you.
Folks, let us know in the comments, do you like the picks that we had for the Tennessee Titans? Are there guys that you think should have been picked instead at certain position groups? Whatever it is, let us know down below. Hit that like button and subscribe as well. And we'll talk to you later.